The laughter tore through the dojo, a jagged sound that ricocheted off the polished wooden walls and stung like a slap. Everyone in the room was in on it, everyone except her. She stood rooted to the spot, mop clutched tightly, its handle slick, with water that dripped in soft plops onto the blue mats. Her gray sweatpants, faded and speckled with bleach, hung loosely on her frame, and her hands trembled not from fear, but from something deeper, something ancient and unspoken. A weight, carried so long it had become part of her bones. The man in the pristine white GI, his black belt tied with practiced precision, pointed at her with a smirk that oozed confidence. "Come on, let's see what you've got," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. The gym fell silent, the air thick with expectation, the crowd waiting for the punchline to land, for her to shrink under their gaze. They thought they knew her janitor, invisible, a shadow who cleaned up their messes, but they were wrong. In that moment, she was about to unravel their assumptions, to show them a strength not forged in belts or applause, but in the quiet, relentless fight to survive a life that had tried to break her. Her name was Elena Marquez, 43 years old, a single mother who'd been scrubbing the mats of the North Star Martial Arts Academy in Vancouver for 6 years. She was the unseen hand that kept the dojo spotless, arriving before the first light of dawn and leaving long after the sun dipped below the horizon. Her days were defined by the sharp tang of disinfectant, the rhythmic squeak of her mop, and the endless cycle of wiping away the sweat, dust, and egos left behind by the students who trained on the mats she polished. No one asked her name. Number 1 noticed the way her left shoulder stiffened when she lifted heavy buckets, or how she wore long-sleeved shirts even in the sticky heat of summer. No one saw the way her eyes lingered on the sparring sessions, tracing the arcs of kicks and punches with a quiet intensity, as if her body remembered something her mind had locked away. 2 decades ago, in a small town outside Mexico City, Elena had been a taekwondo prodigy. At 18, she was a national competitor, her name whispered in gyms as a future Olympian. Her kicks were lightning, her focus unbreakable, her dreams boundless. She trained under the watchful eye of her coach, a charismatic man named Javier, who saw her potential and nurtured it until he saw her heart, too. He was charming, older, a man who spoke of love with the same intensity he brought to the mat. They married when she was 20, and for a while it felt like a fairy tale. But fairy tales don't last when the prince turns predator. Javier's charm hid her darkness, a cruelty that emerged in quiet moments, first with words that cut deeper than any blade, then with fists that left bruises she learned to hide. Her dreams of the Olympics faded as his control tightened, chaining her to a life of fear. Her left shoulder, once strong enough to break boards, was dislocated twice in those years, never healing quite right. Her spirit, once fierce, was battered into silence. When she discovered she was pregnant, something shifted. She couldn't let her child grow up in that shadow. At 27, with her daughter Sophia, just 2 years old, Elena fled. She packed a single backpack, stuffed with diapers, a change of clothes, and the remnants of her old taekwondo belt, frayed but unbroken. She crossed the border into the United States, then made her way to Canada, chasing whispers of safety and a new start. But the new start wasn't the redemption story she'd hoped for. Papers were a maze of bureaucracy, jobs were scarce, and survival was a daily grind. She cleaned houses in Seattle, washed dishes in Portland, and scrubbed floors in Vancouver, her hands calloused, her back aching, her dreams buried under the weight of necessity. When she found the North Star Academy, it was like stumbling onto a piece of her past. The pay was modest, but being near the mats, hearing the sharp exhales of fighters, felt like touching the edge of a life she'd lost. She never spoke of her past, not to the students who ignored her, not to the instructors who barely nodded as she passed, not even to Sophia, who was now 15 and growing into a fierce, kind-hearted girl. Elena poured every spare dollar into Sophia's training at the dojo, never once asking for a discount, even when her budget stretched thin. Sophia was a natural, strong, focused, her kicks carrying the same fire Elena's once had. Watching her daughter spar, Elena felt a quiet pride, but also a pang of loss for the girl she used to be. Sometimes, when the dojo was empty, she'd set her mop aside and move through old forms, her feet tracing patterns on the mats, her body remembering what her heart tried to forget. That day, the dojo was alive with energy. A special demonstration had drawn a crowd: parents, students, local reporters, cameras flashing. The mats were packed with black belts showing off their skills, the air humming with excitement. Elena stayed in the background, as always, wiping down mirrors, collecting stray water bottles, blending into the walls. The black belt leading the demo, Ryan, was a former provincial champion, all charisma and confidence. At 28, he had the kind of charm that made parents smile and students idolize him. His GI was crisp, his movements sharp, his jokes quick. He sparred with students, tossing out playful taunts, feeding off the crowd's cheers. But as the demo neared its end, he wanted a final flourish, something to seal his spotlight. His eyes scanned the room and landed on Elena, half hidden in the corner, mop in hand. He grinned, sensing an easy laugh. "Hey, how about the cleaning lady?" he called out, pointing at her. "Wanna give it a go?" The room exploded in laughter, some loud and mocking, others awkward, a few students looking away, uncomfortable. Elena froze, her mop still dripping, her heart pounding. The crowd's eyes bore into her, waiting for her to laugh it off, to shrink back into her role. Ryan, emboldened by the response, pressed on. "Come on, show us your moves. What's the worst that could happen?" He chuckled, expecting her to wave him off, to play along with the joke. But something shifted in Elena. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was a stillness, a fire reigniting in her chest. She set the mop against the wall, deliberate, her movements slow but steady. Her sleeve slipped up, revealing faint scars on her wristlines that told stories no one in that room could guess. She stepped forward, her sneakers silent on the mats, her eyes locked on Ryan's. The crowd murmured, some snickering, others leaning in, curious. Ryan's grin faltered for a split second, but he recovered, raising his hands in mock surrender. All right, go easy on me," he said, still playing to the crowd. Elena didn't smile. She bowed, her form precise, her stance low and grounded. Two older instructors in the back, men who'd trained for decades, exchanged a glance, recognizing something in her posture, a hint of mastery, a shadow of someone who'd been here before. Ryan, oblivious, threw a lazy punch, expecting her to flinch or fumble. She didn't. Her arm moved like water, deflecting his strike with an ease that made the crowd gasp. He tried again, harder this time, a kick aimed at her side. She sidestepped, fluid as a dancer, and in one breathtaking motion, swept his legs out from under him. Ryan hit the mat with a thud, his GI wrinkled, his confidence shattered. The room went deathly silent. The air sucked out as if the world had paused. He looked up at her, wide-eyed, his breath uneven. Elena stood over him, calm, unshaken. Then she extended a hand, her scarred wrist visible for a moment before her sleeve fell back into place. Ryan took it, stumbling to his feet, his face a mix of shock and something else, respect maybe, or fear of what he'd just unleashed. He bowed, deeply this time, no trace of mockery. A whisper rippled through the crowd. "Who is she?" Another voice, soft but clear, answered from the back. "That's Sophia's mom." The silence broke into applause, not the loud, performative kind, but something heavier, something real. It was the sound of a room realizing they'd misjudged, that they'd overlooked a giant. That night, Sophia found her mother in the small apartment they shared, the one with cracked paint and a leaky faucet. She wrapped her arms around Elena, tears in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Elena brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face, her own eyes soft. "Because you're already everything I ever hoped to be," she said. "You didn't need my story to write your own." The days that followed were different. The dojo felt alive in a new way. Students nodded to Elena as she cleaned some, offering shy smiles. Others asking her name for the first time. The head instructor, Mr. Tanaka, a quiet Japanese-Canadian grandmaster who'd watched the demo in silence, approached her a week later. He bowed low, his voice steady but warm. "Ms. Marquez, it would be our honor to have you train with us." "Not just Sophia." Elena hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. "I'm too old," she said. "Too tired." But Sophia, sitting beside her, took her hand. "For you, Mom. Just once." So Elena dug out her old taekwondo belt, its edges frayed but its spirit intact. She tied it around her waist, her fingers trembling not from fear but from the weight of stepping back into herself. She walked onto the mat, not as the janitor, but as the fighter she'd always been. The woman who'd survived more battles than anyone in that room could imagine. She trained beside Sophia, their kicks and blocks, moving in sync, a dance of strength and love. The other students watched, some in awe, others with quiet respect. The dojo became a place of stories, not just of victories on the mat, but of lives lived in the shadows. Of scars earned and battles won in silence, Elena's courage cracked something open. Students started sharing their own struggles. Father, who'd lost his job, a teenager battling anxiety, an instructor who'd overcome addiction. The dojo became more than a place to train. It was a space to be seen, to be heard. Elena, once invisible, was now a beacon, her quiet strength reminding everyone that heroes don't always wear capes or belts. Sometimes they carry mops, scars, and hearts that refuse to break. This isn't just Elena's story, it's a reminder that every person you pass has a history, a fight, a spark worth seeing. The person pouring your coffee, the one sweeping the floor, the quiet face in the crowd, they carry worlds you'll never know unless you look closer. So take a moment, share a kind word, offer a smile, ask a name. Because the strongest people aren't always the ones shouting their victories, they're the ones who keep going, day after day, when no one's watching. Let's see them. Let's honor them. Let's make sure they know their stories matter.